Overwhelmingly, the research indicates that adopting an abstinence model when it comes to pornography increases distress, increases
Mm,
shame and guilt, and makes the problem worse. So I
mm.
wanted something that was going to be more accessible, but the problem is guys don't read generally, and and then I found that when I was talking about pornography, I talked a lot about the research around it. I talked a lot about the science. And one time I was on Katie Couric's talk show when she had a
Mhm.
talk show, and she got really upset with me as I challenged some of her beliefs and kind of morally
Mm.
based ideas about pornography. And I realized then that I needed to be able to talk about pornography in a more accessible way. And so I
Mhm.
went back and I rewrote the book as though I was sitting and having a beer with a guy talking about their porn use. And
Mhm.
I pulled out the clinical language, I pulled out the science, and I said, "Hey, let's just come down to earth and talk about this stuff." And and it worked. And I've had lots of men write me about how accessible they found it, but I've also really coolly had lots of women write me and say, reading this helped me understand why my husband or boyfriend is watching porn, and now I'm not so scared of it.
Wow, that's powerful. Now I have to probe. So your position is that porn isn't the problem, it's how you use it.
Overwhelmingly, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the uh, so I'm going to go back on my word now, right? I'm going to talk about the research.
Yeah.
And the research indicates that, people who have problems use porn in problematic ways. And so, particularly when it comes to men, we see men that have serious anxiety problems and
Mhm.
depression problems and
Mhm.
negative emotion problems. They oftentimes use porn in unhealthy ways because
Mhm.
they are using masturbation to porn as one of the most powerful, effective ways that they have to manage their negative
Mm.
emotions. When we're turned on, those negative emotions go away for a little while.
Mm.
And porn and masturbation is a very effective way to do it. However, what I tell those guys is, if you get stressed out at your kid's PTA conference, whipping out your phone and looking at porn is not going to be a very effective strategy. So what else you
Mhm.
got? So with those guys, I never tell them to stop watching porn, because when we tell people not to do something, we paradoxically oftentimes increase the salience of it. There's this great research by Yaniv Efrati in Israel, who found that the more people try to not think about masturbation, the more they think about it. Right?
Pink elephant.
Don't think about that naked pink elephant, and if you do, you're a dirty pervert, right? And should be ashamed of yourself. So instead of trying to stop the porn use, because the porn use is just a symptom of a problem, instead
Mm.
of trying to stop the porn use, we try to identify what the porn is doing and identify, are there other strategies that can achieve that same function.
Mhm.
The other group, interestingly, that struggle with porn are people who are ashamed of their porn use. And, there's an internet myth that watching too much porn causes erectile dysfunction when you go to be
Mhm.
with a partner.
Mhm.
And the science is all against that. What is clear is that there's one group of men that do experience erectile dysfunction when they go to be with a partner related to their porn use. And
Mhm.
it is men who are ashamed of watching porn. So the
Wow.
more shame and moral conflict they have, typically because they were raised religious, and then they go to be with their partner and they're feeling guilty and ashamed over having jerked off to porn. And now that shame and guilt gets in the way of sexual function. But
Um,
again, the porn is just a symptom of this unresolved moral conflict about their sexual desires. They have sexual desires, whether it's masturbation or fantasy or whatever, that they were taught made them a bad person. And so when they
mm,
engage in this behavior, now they think they're a bad person. And then when they go to be with their partner, they think, well, she shouldn't be with a bad person, right?
mm,
I'm a bad person. I don't deserve to be with this person. And
mhm.
that gets in the way. So unfortunately, and I see lots and lots of people that come to me talking about struggling with porn, and I always want to get behind the curtain and let's talk about what's going on behind the story, because porn is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's figure out all of the things that are contributing to this. And porn is typically what I call a sexy, shiny object, that we get distracted by that.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about the person. I want to talk about the person.
Wow. One question came to mind for me when you were explaining that is, well, is there a difference between the type of porn they watch? Like if you watch amateur porn versus like violent gangbang, like on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, it's a nuanced question. So I do ask people what kind of porn you watch, and most clinicians don't. I think it's important because typically the kind of porn they watch tells us something about some of their sexual desires that are often unmet in their personal sexual life. So oftentimes they're watching porn that is a fantasy that they have that doesn't exist in real life. So that helps me again start to understand them as a person, and what they are looking for. The I see people who are struggling with moral conflict over porn because they worry about, are the performers being taken advantage of? Is this consensual? And that's where I, really happily get to introduce them to the idea of ethical porn, with performers, whether it's Pink and White Productions or Afterglow. There are these groups out there now, largely women led, that are making ethical porn where the performers are all consenting, not being exploited. They're engaging in behaviors that they want to engage in. And it's like fair trade coffee. You don't
Yeah.
have to feel guilty about watching this because nothing bad happened here.
Right. Everyone's happy to be here.
That's right. And now some of the porn, even ethical porn, can be hardcore. And then we get into the question of, are there sexual desires or fantasies that are unhealthy that people shouldn't pursue? And Christian Joyal is a Canadian researcher who's really looked at this and found that people who have fantasies of non-consensual behavior, unhealthy sexual behaviors, are the least likely to try to engage those behaviors in real life. It does not appear, in fact, that watching unhealthy porn contributes to you engaging in unhealthy sexual behaviors, unless you're already an unhealthy person. And so that men that are antisocial, men that have misogyny, men that have low empathy, if they watch unhealthy, exploitive, non-consensual porn, it increases their chances of engaging in unhealthy sexual behaviors. But women preferentially watch rough sex or violent porn more than men do. Women search out rough sex and violent porn more than men do. Now, proportionately, more men watch that material than women because more men watch porn.
Yeah.
But when we look relative, and you can, I'm sure you can teach me more about the statistics than
by
anybody
ratio.
else. Exactly. Yeah. Then we see that for some reason, women are more attracted to rough sex and violent sex, simulated rape fantasy than men are. But women, women are the least likely to kind of engage in unhealthy sexual behaviors related to their porn watching. So again, we have to be very, very careful about attempting to separate the porn or the sex fantasy from the person.
Right.
There's a lovely book called Who's Been Sleeping in Your Head, by Brett Carr. He's a British psychotherapist, and he looks at like 20 or 30,000 sexual fantasies. And at the end of the day, he says, I can't see that there's any such thing as an unhealthy fantasy. That sexual fantasy, and that's all porn is. Porn is sexual fantasy made external. there's no such thing as an unhealthy sexual fantasy. Sexual fantasies are the ways that we work through our questions and dilemmas around sex. There are unhealthy people, and those unhealthy people need help. Sexuality is typically just a symptom of some of the unhealth that they're struggling with.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites. Love Bites. By Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.